Good. Good to be with you on Tuesday after Christmas, right before the new year. Let's start with our first question from a viewer who says, I'm confused about your definition of unconditional love. If my spouse is unfaithful to me, in other words, has an affair with another woman, is my love conditional when I'm disappointed in his actions? So it'll be easier to understand if I just talk about what would it be like if you were unconditionally loving. So if your love were really unconditional and your spouse had an affair, how would you respond? You would be unconditionally concerned about his happiness. So you'd be thinking, so he had an affair, must have been pretty unhappy, must have been empty. It's the only reason people have affairs, is to get a new source of imitation love. Must be feeling alone. And so what can we do to address that? That's how you would address it if you were really unconditionally loving, which would be the case with almost none of us. So that's the ideal. You would be thinking about your partner. But it's unavoidable that you would experience some disappointment because of what you're not getting, or because of what you perceive was being done to you. So if you feel disappointed when your partner has an affair, it's just an indication that your love isn't perfectly unconditional, which would be the case with, all of us. Then you continue. Continuing in your exploration of what unconditional love would be, if my young teenage child has sex, how do I express unconditional love while letting her know that her actions were wrong and disappointing? I don't love her less for her actions, but somehow I must convey to her that her actions are not acceptable. I don't understand from reading some of your information on the website how you can discipline a child without making our love conditional. I guess I can go so far as to say I disagree. Can you explain to me where I'm wrong? Oh, so a child screws up. You got a 14, 15-year-old kid who's out having sex with, young men, which is rarely, actually never wise. And how do you communicate that these actions are not acceptable while still being loving? Well, the first mistake that almost all of us make is that we suppose that we haven't already communicated that. So, 14-year-old kid, you discover that she's been having sex, and you make the assumption that somehow she's completely retarded, hasn't heard anything that you've been saying for the 14 years previous to this, and we feel like we have to tell them. In the same way that, a kid at the dining room table knocks over a glass of milk, and we all go, "Ugh, how many times have I told you not to?" Well, there really is no 6-year-old child who hasn't already figured out that it's easier to drink the milk from a glass than licking it off the dining room table. And yet we think that we have to tell them that. Well, it's better to have it in the glass. Duh. Just like the 14-year-old girl who has sex with her classmate, and we feel like we have to tell them that it's not wise. Well, haven't you already told her that? Probably 100 times prior to this. So what's the reason to reiterate the mistake after she's made it? You know what you've done is wrong. She's got that. So what needs to be done now? To unconditionally accept the child, as in not express disappointment, not express irritation, and now focus on, so what is the most loving and most productive set of decisions that we can make now? The kid already knows that she made a mistake. After you've done enough teaching, usually what's left is loving. And, then we worry as parents, well, if I don't communicate to the child that she's made a mistake, she'll think that I condone her behavior. Oh, please. Why do you think the child came and told you this with her head all hung down and all feeling ashamed? The kid knows that they've made a mistake, whether it's having sex or stealing or lying or cheating or whatever it is. They know it. They're really not retarded. And so they need to feel accepted and loved while they're making their mistake. And then we can make far more productive decisions and can teach them even more. So at some point you can say to the kid, so what have you learned from this experience? Probably not the best thing to ask the very first time you learn about it. I mean, when a 14-year-old comes to you sobbing and says, I'm pregnant, grilling them about what they've learned, probably not a good time. But if we're really unconditionally accepting, then we can ask them what they've learned. We can make decisions. Now, what are we going to do? Do you plan on raising the child? You can really ask questions rather than making accusations, which just drives you further apart. The child then feels more afraid and will make poorer decisions. So what we do as parents is love and teach simultaneously all the time. But on some occasions, when they know they've made a mistake, you just stick with the loving, and then the teaching comes later. So, yeah, it really is possible to unconditionally love our children while communicating to them what is, you can call it whatever you want, right, wrong, loving, unloving, productive, unproductive. But there's really no productive role for disappointment. Do any of us learn better when we make mistakes and somebody goes, so you're going to learn better? No, you're just going to feel worse about yourself. Here's a viewer who says, I've gone on 2 dates so far with a man. It was fun, felt natural. I wasn't trying too hard to sell myself to this new person. Good start. He's outgoing, which makes it even easier to get to know him. We both feel a physical chemistry. I can just tell. For me, it is the strongest that I've felt since I left my husband last year. One thing I really like about him is that he's honest. He described himself as being honest to a fault. Well, it's our observations about somebody's honesty that matter more than somebody saying they're honest, because in my experience, most people who say, I'm meticulously honest, really mean they're honest about other people. They're very quick to point out other people's flaws. They never, in fact, let other people's flaws go by, and that's what they count as honest. And that's not the kind of honesty that leads to happiness. That's actually just intrusive, irritating, and it just offends people. Or they mean that they're honest about money. They mean that they don't steal from other people. But that's not the kind of honesty alone that leads to happiness either. I know any number of people who don't steal, who don't lie on their income tax, but they're still miserable because they can't tell the truth about themselves. That's the kind of honesty that leads to happiness. Now, then you continue. Here's an example of his honesty. On our first date, he confided that he started dating again too soon after his separation, which was 2 years ago, because he felt that he had to prove to himself that he was desirable to a woman. All right, well, so that's a level of honesty. That's good. It's an even deeper and more meaningful level of honesty if he can answer why his last relationship ended. So, good, he's admitting that he maybe started dating too soon to feel better about himself, but now ask him, so why did your last relationship end? And if he says, oh, well, it's because my last partner was A, B, C, D, and then criticizes his last partner, if you go into a relationship with him, you'll be next. He'll be soon speaking about you like that. See if he can tell the truth about the mistakes he made. I was too controlling. I wasn't honest. See if he can talk about himself. Then you continue. 5 days after our first date, he called me and he said he really wants to get to know me better, and I was flattered by this. He seemed sincere. It's tough for me not to set up expectations after hearing this flattering comment. And see, the fact that the comment is flattering to you just is an indication to you that you are susceptible to being manipulated. But really, I don't know how that statement will translate into behaviors, not yet anyway. So remember that after 2 dates, honey, you're not trying to cement a relationship. You're just gathering information. So relax. Just observe him more. Observe yourself more as you interact with him. You continue. Some good news. This guy is not clinging to me. He acts appropriately and already has a full life without me in it. He also has great social skills and lots of energy. So I want to talk about some of our potential differences in life about issues. And your first was life priorities. On our first date, he told me that his top 2 priorities in life are completing his graduate degree in teaching. He left his corporate job to make a career change into teaching, and raising his young son. They have joint custody, he and his ex-wife. He said he could easily get caught up in these priorities and 10 years could go by. But dating is also important. He said he doesn't want to be alone. This concerns me because if we get involved, where would I fit in? Would this be a repeat of the situation I had with my ex-husband where his business was also first? So notice that you've commented that the good news is that he's not clinging to you. And now you're worried that he might not cling to you. So, he's independent, which is good, but you don't want him so independent that he doesn't need you. And that's something questions you need to ask about yourself. What do you really need in a relationship? And you need to ask him. You need to ask him where you'd fit in. So, for example, what if graduate school, you might ask him, what if graduate school took you away from the family a great deal? And what if we were married and I said to you, it may be that your graduate school curriculum load is too heavy because you seem to never be available. You need to ask him, how would he resolve that? Now, you'll just learn a little bit from the answer because, frankly, he can't tell you how he's going to resolve it, and you won't know until he's actually there. But you'll learn something about him by his answer. What if he just says, well, school's the most important thing? Well, honey, you're going to be second, third, or fourth. But at least you'll learn a little bit from his answer. What would the priority you need to ask be between you and his son? What if there is a conflict? What would he do? And you might give him some sample scenarios. Get an example, get a copy of the parenting book, and you can look up some scenarios about how to handle children, and then give him, using one of those scenarios, say, so if this problem arose with your son, and you had to make a choice between spending time with him or spending time with me, what would you do? Ask him that. And if he says, oh, well, my son is first, because many parents say that. My children are always first. I can tell you that I've never seen a healthy partnership where somebody said that. When I say I'm going to put my children first, what does that communicate to my partner? You're second or third. That relationship will dissolve. You can't put your children first. Now, the reason that we do that is usually a combination of guilt and what we get back. Our children make us feel guilty when we don't pay attention to them first, and our children more immediately reward us. You give a child a piece of candy, and they immediately give you a smile and make you feel good. Oh, I'm such a good dad because my child gave me a smile. Cheap thrills, honey. Much harder to get a sense of being loving with a partner who can't be bought with a piece of candy. It's a little more complicated with the partner. Actually, it's a little more work on our part. We actually have to be loving to be seen as a good partner with a wife or a husband. So you need to ask him where he would put you. And what many people don't realize is that the most loving gift you could possibly give to a child is to have a loving relationship with your partner. Partner, the word, hence, we're one. And if you're one with your partner, the increase in love that you will experience as a result of feeling loved by your partner and loving him or her can then pass on to your children. Whereas if you decide you're going to love your children first, and the reason is almost always because of what we get back, then when our children don't sufficiently reward us for making these sacrifices for them, now we're just left with nothing. Now we can't love them, we can't love our partner, everybody's screwed. So it's not a good sign when somebody says, I will always put my child first. And to many people, that seems to make sense that they would. Well, see, my child is from my flesh. That's stupid reasoning. So is my fingernails, and I don't put them first. Or, let's see, I've lived with my child longer, and so my first allegiance is to my child. That's going to screw you up too. If you're going to be in a long-term committed relationship, you have to put your partner first if you want that relationship to be healthy and if you want to best love your child. So good question to be asking him. Question 2, you said, both of our dates were either free or inexpensive. So far, he has spent nearly nothing on me. On our first date, he said that one thing that bothers him about dating is that most women are looking for a guy with money. Then he said that he's in debt and has no money. Sounds like a rationalization for... Anyway, so it sounds as though he's saying that most women are looking for a guy with money as an excuse for him not spending, when the truth is that he just simply has none. You continue, I'm not a gold digger, and finding someone with money is not my top priority. However, a certain amount of money is usually spent in standard dating. So somewhere, somebody taught you that spending money on you is almost a prerequisite for a certain indication of affection, which may not be the case at all. I'm not confident that he would spend money on me, or maybe he can't afford to, or that he would ever take me out to dinner. For me, it's not really the money. And yet, from what you're saying here, it sounds like it is the money. Because if your first 2 dates went well and no money was spent, then what do you care? What matters is the unconditional acceptance you feel from your partner, not the money that they spend on you. It goes back to a potential red flag about life priorities. Even people who say they have no money can find money for things they really care about. It sounds like you have some real judgments about money. So my point is that if dating were more of a priority for him, he'd spend some money versus the 0 he spent so far on dating or dating me. So I think what really bothers me, you say, is that he won't hesitate to spend significant sums of money on his son for entertainment and sports and such. So what does this say about where I fit in? All right. So if you're looking for him to spend money as an indication that he cares about you, you're pretty much screwed because you've defined love as something that you can quantify, a form of imitation love. What would be a concern is if he doesn't hesitate to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on his son, but then when it comes to something that you'd like to do, suddenly there's no money available. And that's something that you need to talk to him about. Ask him what his priorities are about spending money. For example, if you asked to go out to dinner, but he was about to spend $500 on some form of entertainment for his son, what would he choose? And if without hesitation he says, oh, well, I'd spend the money on my son, that's something to think about. It's not whether he's spending money on you or not, it's where he prioritizes you versus his son. And if there's a versus at all, you're going to lose. So it's something to talk about now rather than after you marry him. Issue 3, sex. On our first date, I talked a little about real love and mentioned how people, all of us, are constantly transacting. He immediately jumped in by saying, like sex. Then I explained about the 4 forms, praise, power, pleasure, safety. And these have different currencies or values to different people. I told him that safety meant a lot to me, and he said, why do women care so much about safety? It doesn't do much for me. That's a conversation that you need to pursue. Like as in pretty soon, because it's important for our partners to understand in an unconditionally loving relationship that they don't have to agree with what matters to us, but they do have to accept what matters to us. There are things that matter more to my partner, Donna, than they matter to me, and they'll never matter as much to me. I don't even understand entirely why they matter more to her than to me. I don't care. All I need to know is they matter to her. And allow her to place that greater emphasis on whatever it is, safety, physical affection, money, whatever it is, to allow her to have different priorities in her life than I have. And to not dismiss her priorities and say, well, it just doesn't make any sense, which it kind of sounds like he's doing with yours. I'm not saying that he's doing that, but that's something that you would need to ask him, whether he'd be willing to accept your different priorities. You continue. Anyway, He talked about how he used to belong to a group of nudists like 20 years ago, and that nudity seems natural to him. So how do I take this? Is he trying to see how I'll react to him saying something sensational? How would I know? Ask him. But don't just let it go. Just ask him what he means. Ask him how, is he just saying that nudity seems natural? Or is he saying that he would like to see more nudity from himself, from you? Ask him what he means by that instead of wondering. Ask him how he feels about sex now. Ask him whether he feels like it's important to share sex early in a relationship, whether it's something that he'd like to wait till later in the relationship to offer or to share. Gosh, don't wonder, honey. Ask him. Regardless of the nudity thing you continue, I can tell that sex will become an issue soon if we continue dating. I'm attracted to him, but I also want to get to know him better before we have sex. So my question is, how can I communicate this to him, and when should I communicate this? Well, you know, you're a big girl. You're not 17, and you've had 2 dates with this guy. By the 3rd or 4th date, you ought to be talking about the role of that sex will potentially have in your relationship and see if it agrees with yours. I would reiterate that people who share sex early in their relationship will be often very distracted by it and then not really know what their relationship is based on. Let's see. You said he didn't try to plan a 3rd date toward the end of our 2nd date, so I don't know if that's a bad sign. He did say to me during the date that he liked something I was wearing and asked if I'd go shopping with him so that he could buy something similar himself. This was an interesting suggestion and seemed like a familiar, comfortable request to make of a new person in his life. So keep talking to him openly about that and everything else. P.S. This is a man who hasn't contacted me in 12 days since our 2nd date. His son has vacation from school, and I think they're traveling to visit relatives. Nonetheless, I feel hurt, disappointed, ignored, and overlooked. Clearly some expectations there, huh? Obviously, I'm not on his mind, and I really seem to want the $2 from this one man instead of finding the $2 million through giving and receiving real love with many people. This is all just information, darling. You've been on 2 dates with this guy, and like you say, you're already hurt that he's not paying you more attention. So a lot of this is your problem, putting a burden on him to make you feel worthwhile. So when he comes back from wherever he is, ask him about it. Ask him whether, your relationship is to the point where you could hope that when he's gone for 12 days, he might let you know where he was. Just ask him, where are we with that? And if he's annoyed by that, well, why would I have to report to you? And if it's obvious that when he's with his son, you mean nothing to him, interesting information. You'd rather know that now than after you'd been married to him for 6 months, wouldn't you? All this is just gathering information, darling. Just gather it rather than get offended or bothered by it. Here's a reader who says, or a viewer who says, I read the Real Love book twice now, but I'm still struggling with hurt and anger. My main issue is that I work too hard for the people I love. I seem to care more about their happiness than my own. In some ways, is this a good thing? But I think I need to look after myself more. How does one balance loving others with loving yourself? It's not terribly complicated. You give to people what you're able to give. You give to people what you choose to give, what you want to give, rather than what you feel like you have to do or because you're motivated by guilt. If you do that, you're going to be miserable. And even when you give to people, if you give out of duty or obligation or because you want something back, then you're going to feel like you're put upon all the time. You're going to feel like, as you said here, I work too hard for the people I love. So if you said, in your own words, I'm working too hard, clearly you'd prefer to be working less. And you're not getting enough reward from the people that you are trying to love. It's too big an effort. And so it doesn't sound like you're giving it freely. Now, I can't tell you in any given instance whether you're giving it freely, but pay attention to your feelings. As you go to do something for somebody, if you have this air of, well, What am I going to get back? That's not free, and you're going to end up resenting it. This next viewer says, I entertain private thoughts of divorce and experience such discouragement, but when I'm with my husband during the day, I interact normally. Impossible. And this is a common self-deception where people say things like, well, I'm irritated at my spouse, but I don't show it. And here you are saying, I'm discouraged, I'm thinking of divorce, but when I'm with him, I act normally. No, you don't. It can't be done. Your feelings will leak out and he'll sense them. You continue, I experience such anger toward him and have resentment toward him for his facetious attitude toward life. You can't be that irritated and have him not feel it. I resent his treating me like some buddy, that is not somebody, but some B-U-D-D-Y, instead of his wife who has feelings and needs and desires. So you're clearly annoyed with how he doesn't love you, and you are communicating that to him. I feel at odds with him because he doesn't nurture our relationship but gravitates toward neighbors and friends instead of toward me. This is a really common question where people say, so how can my husband be so sweet and kind to his office workers and everybody else, but not to me? It just proves what I was just talking to you about. You express disappointment and irritation to him all the time. Does anybody like hearing those expressions? Do you like being around anybody who, when they see you, goes, no, you don't like being around somebody who clearly expresses that they don't enjoy you, that they're disappointed by you, irritated by you. He feels that from you, so he would rather be with his friends, he'd rather be pretty much anywhere, than with you, because you make it unpleasant. I'm not rationalizing or not justifying what he's doing, but that's why he doesn't like being around you. Instead of feeling like we're a couple, I feel that he's alone in his dealings with people and has no interest in us being us instead of singly interacting with others. He says negative things about life in general most of the time. No doubt. He hates not feeling loved by you. And it's understandable that you don't love him, but when those feelings leak out, he doesn't want to be around you. The question is, do you want to change that? Do you want to change the way you are so that he will feel differently about your affection toward him? You continue. I try to change me and have done a pretty good job of it, but much of the time I feel that it is so not worth it. He will not change. He refuses to learn, or so it seems. So notice what you've said so far. You're disappointed with him, you're angry at him, he won't change, and you don't think it's worth being in a relationship with him, and you think he doesn't feel that. Yuck. So if you want to change this relationship, demanding that he change is not going to work. You'd have to be willing to tell him how wrong you have been, and tell him the mistakes you've made in not being unconditionally loving toward him, and then see what happens. We haven't had sex for more than a year, nor do I necessarily want sex with him. I would imagine you wouldn't if you have all those negative feelings toward him. It costs me too much emotionally, and then I become an angry person afterward. And that's pretty much the story with sex on the planet. People have a great time initially because the trade is great, but then we become disappointed, and then sex becomes actually a source of annoyance because we're not getting sufficient back for what we're giving. I'm an unhappy person in this marriage, you say. There's not much joy left inside of me. My faith and family are the only source of joy in my life. So do you see, you're doing the same thing that you just accused him of doing. You say that he's not nice to you, but he's nice to other people. And here you're saying you don't like him, but you do find joy in your faith and your family. So you both become so disappointed and disgusted with each other that you've gone off and created separate lives. You're doing it every bit as much as he is. I'm grateful for them, that is my family and faith. I don't dare reveal any weaknesses to my husband, or he will use that knowledge against me at some future date when we're having a disagreement. Then he will beat me over the head with it. He never abuses me physically, but only in a passive-aggressive way, emotionally. And if you continue to act on that fear, that if you tell him the truth about yourself, he will beat you over the head with it, your relationship's doomed because you won't ever tell him the truth. The only way your relationship's ever going to change is if you are the one who begins telling the truth about yourself, even though he might beat you over the head with it. But I can tell you, having done this for a long time now, most of the time that people decide to just tell the truth about themselves in an open and loving way, the other person will abuse you for that rarely. Where they become abusive is when we defend ourselves. So if I defend myself with you and say, no, I'm not, and I'm not this, and then you beat me bloody until I finally admit that I made a mistake, you might beat me over the head with that because I've been denying the truth all these years. I finally give you just a morsel of truth. You probably will grab hold of that and beat me over the head with it because you've been waiting to do it for years. But if I initiate it and say, oh man, I've been such an idiot in our relationship. I've been selfish, I've withdrawn, I've attacked you, I've been critical, and I initiate that and I defend myself none. I've seen the other person become then aggressive and attacking almost never. Less than 10% of the time, by far. It's openness and lovingness that disarms people, not defending ourselves. So you're not going to know until you try it, honey. There have been many times when I have felt an awful hatred for him. Honey, you keep wondering why this relationship isn't working, and you've described it. Disappointed, angry, don't feel that it's worth it, and then you feel an awful hatred for him, and you wonder whether he's feeling it. Yeah, he is. Which causes me much grief and great concern. I try to love him unconditionally and lay aside my own needs and desires for growth and progress only to find myself and him still in the same old rut. Honey, we go over the details forever, but it really comes down to, are you willing to tell the truth about your screw-ups with this man, even if he doesn't respond in kind, even if he might attack you? Are you willing to take the first step toward being loving? If you're not, your relationship will continue like it is. You're right. What have you got to lose? It couldn't suck a whole lot worse than it is now. So tell him. Say, I've blown it. I've screwed it. Look in the marriage book, and you will see several examples of one partner telling his or her truth to their spouse. And do that with him. Now, if you have any doubts about it, if you're afraid of it, practice telling the truth about yourself to some people in the real love community first, so that you can become more comfortable with it, more familiar with it. The other reason to do that is that if you don't practice with somebody who knows real love, what you will tend to do, instead of telling the truth about yourself, you will tend to defend yourself and you'll tend to attack him. On many occasions, people have written me and said, all right, so I'm finally ready to tell the truth about myself to whoever, my husband, my wife, my sister. I want to send you an email that I was about to send to them to see if it's sufficiently loving. Almost invariably, their first attempt is filled with accusations of their partner, justifications, defenses, and so on. So practice truth-telling with other people before you try to tell the truth to your partner, because we tend to screw up with them the most because we have the greatest expectations of them and because we've been hurt by them in the past. Here's a viewer who says, I want to share this experience first to see if it's normal, and second, to seek any explanation you might have. I've been doing real love for quite a while now. After some coaching, I knew that I was pretty confident with the principles, and although I have found it difficult sometimes to communicate with people in the real love community because I didn't always agree with the angle that they were coming from, which is unavoidable, we tend to learn about real love, then go to like a real love conference call or tell the truth to a real love person and expect them to love us perfectly. Well, good luck with that. The real love we get is almost always in little bits, little dribs and drabs, and it's mixed with imitation love. People give us the best that they've got. However, you continue, life had one of its many blowouts yesterday, and my partner dumped a whole lot of information on me that he wanted an immediate response to. Well, he got an immediate response, but I gave it to him in a raw, unprocessed manner, the result of which was that he walked out again, leaving me in my usual state of despondence and anxiety. As the day progressed, I realized that he responded the way he did because he was empty. And although I knew he hadn't been fair in demanding a response from me, I know that my emotional response was an unprocessed tantrum demanding what I wanted. Well, good for you. So this is a great example of you telling the truth, the kind of thing you might share with him. You beat him up and he withdrew. Kind of predictable, wasn't it? Then you say, this is the bit that's been unusual for me. During the day, I spent the usual time dragging myself out of victimhood, contacting people, explaining where I was. And the difference is that for a moment, I was able to actually emotionally connect with what I was saying. Somebody once said to me on my real love journey that eventually my heart and my head would begin to join. Is this it? I can't answer whether that's exactly what they were talking about, but many people talk about real love for years, but they never actually experience what it feels like to be accepted unconditionally while they're telling the truth. And the biggest reason is they don't really get open. They don't really say, here's what I did, without also making an accusation of somebody else, without making a justification for what they did. And so it sounds like you got closer to being truly honest about how you screwed up. And then you trusted somebody to love you, that they were loving you the best they could, and you felt it. We don't really change until we feel loved. It's not just a matter of going through the outward process, which really changes few people. So as you're beginning to connect with this feeling of really being loved, you can begin to share that a little bit with him. You may have noticed that it was probably easier to tell the truth about yourself to other people, easier than to tell it to him, because you have the greatest expectations of him. So keep at it, honey. It's about practicing it and getting better at it. Let's see if we have any live questions. We're honored this evening by having some people from the Real Love community all over the place. From Canada, from Texas, who are here live in the studio tonight. Here's somebody who says, I manage a restaurant a few days a week, and I just had a server put in her 2 weeks' notice, basically because of me. She said that she feels that I am harsh with her and the kitchen staff. She says she likes me a lot as a person, loves talking with me, etc., but she says that in a moment, I can be rude. That's always confusing, isn't it? I really like working with her as a person, but I'm leaving because of her. She didn't use that exact word, but that's what I heard, the word rude. My struggle here is that I feel like I'm doing my job. I'm taking care of the guests, and sometimes that means speaking quickly to make something happen on the fly. Regardless of my justification, I'm unhappy with myself for being this way, not knowing how to empower people. She's not the first to complain. Also, she waited until it built up to tell me because she assumed that I would not hear her. I've now got to go in tomorrow and tell the general manager that she's quitting because of me. My intention is to be as honest as possible and just allow whatever happens to happen. If I lose my job, I do. And I'll have to deal with the consequences of this behavior. It's a big deal that I'm really struggling with. All right, so let me know as I'm talking about this whether it makes sense to you, whether it fits with your situation. When we supervise people, it's unavoidable that we're going to run into situations where they are not performing according to the standards that have been set. So we have to say something. That's our job. That's your job as a supervisor, to say something to this server if something's not going quite right. If you don't tell her, who will? So our job as supervisor is to simultaneously love them accept them, not express disappointment and irritation, and yet teach them when they screw up? Well, so there's a twofold problem that's going to happen routinely over and over. A, we won't love them perfectly while we communicate to them the necessary information. So let's say that a customer had to wait on this particular server, or an order was delayed, and you say to her, this can't happen. It may be that in the heat of the moment, and because of your own inexperience with both receiving and giving unconditional love, you may communicate that to her in a less than perfectly loving way. Now, keep remembering that always we're dealing with people who are not completely filled with real love. So if you've got somebody who's not feeling unconditionally loved, they're already raw, already sunburned. So how much of a mistake do you think you have to make before they go from sunburned to intolerably painful? Nothing. You'd only have to be off of unconditionally loving just a hair, and they'll become offended. So we just have to be constantly examining ourselves to say, so how loving was I? Oh, pretty loving as I could be, but not quite loving enough for that particular person, and so I can see why they were offended by it. It's just a piece of information. The other part of it is that when people don't feel unconditionally loved, in some cases, when people are feeling sufficiently victim-y, you don't have to make any mistake and they'll get offended. So simply telling them you're not doing it right, many people hear that in the tone of the most critical person they've ever known. So in my own life, I know on many occasions, and I can spot them easily, when I've spoken to somebody and I've told them what they needed to hear, but I was not perfectly loving. Oh, hundreds, thousands of those occasions. I can see those. There have also been occasions when I have been loving towards somebody and just calmly, even casually, describe to them a behavior that is interfering with their productivity, their happiness, whatever, and watch those people blow up as though I had screamed at them. No matter what I say, they hear their mother or father saying it, and they hear it said in the old and the worst tone that they could possibly imagine. So, which is going on here with this server? Don't know. I couldn't tell you. All you can do is be aware of your part in it. When you spoke to her, were you completely loving and kind and caring? Now, you do have to tell her when she makes a mistake, but were you kind? If you weren't completely kind, then I would recommend that you go in, and when you talk to the general manager, you say, Susie's quitting. She has said that she's quitting because of me. Now, I think part of that is true. There have been some occasions when I've been maybe a little hasty. There have been some occasions when I've been unnecessarily critical in my tone with her. There's also a significant element of this that is hers. There's some mistakes that she has made repeatedly, and she doesn't want to hear correction about those things. So I would say that I've had some part in that, but there's also considerable responsibility that would fall on her shoulders. And I just wanted to tell you the truth about it, the best that I could see it. So you just tell the truth, and you learn. But you don't take all the responsibility just because you weren't perfect. If we have to be perfect as parents or supervisors when we talk to people before we correct them, there would be no teaching that ever happened. Which of us could ever claim, I am perfectly unconditionally loving now, and so now I'll teach people? Good luck. But all we can do is observe what part of our teaching was loving, what part wasn't, and continually attempt to improve upon it. That's all. And let me know if that helped, or if there's more information you want to provide. Here's a viewer who says, I have a friend who is drowning for a lack of unconditional love. I think we all have lots of friends like that. She's desperate and expresses anger and guilt whenever I don't respond to her demands for time or support. Yeah, little wonder there. I'm one of her only support networks, and it's burning me out and causing me difficulties maintaining other relationships. She doesn't want to hear my suggestions for her to seek other help. I'm seriously concerned for her well-being, but I don't know how to be loving to her while still maintaining myself. I'm so afraid that if I say no to her, she will feel abandoned. How can I break this cycle of her seeking imitation love and put her on the path to finding real love? I'm about to make your life pretty easy. How do I put her on the path to finding real love? Listen carefully. You don't. It's not your responsibility to put her on a path to anywhere. Your responsibility is very simple. It's to do the best you can to love her and accept her. And then sometimes to teach her where she'll listen, to offer her suggestions, guidance, wisdom, insight, whatever. But then it's entirely up to her, and you're attempting to take this responsibility from her. It's entirely up to her whether she feels the love you offer and whether she's willing to accept these suggestions, advice, guidance that you give her. You're taking that responsibility from her. You're saying, well, she would feel abandoned if I didn't do more. Well, and I don't mean this in an unkind way. Tough. All you can do is love her. Whether she feels abandoned is up to her. So let's say that she needs 10 units of unconditional love, or attention, or time, or whatever. And you have 6 to offer. The tendency of victims is to say, and victims are, 98% of the planet, so she's not rare. The tendency for victims is to say, oh, so you won't give me the other 4. And they make a big fuss and they blame you for feeling abandoned, neglected, abused, whatever. Or they could make the loving choice, the grateful choice, the truer choice of saying, thanks for the 6. I'll go around the corner and find somebody that can give me 4 more. Or 2 people who can give me 2 apiece, whatever it is. You are not responsible for making her happy. And you are believing her when she tells you, I'm not happy because of what you didn't do. Lie. It's just not the case. So we're constantly trying to be as loving as we can, constantly trying to improve who we are, give more, love more. But if I love somebody the best I can, and then that's not enough for them, that's a reflection of where they are, not of what I gave. And that's an important thing for you to remember. So if she feels abandoned, in fact, I've been involved in cases where people have even said, well, if you don't give me more, I'll kill myself. Whoa, that's emotional blackmail. And I've even said, well, that choice is up to you, but this is what I have to offer you. Well, but if you just give me this much more, I wouldn't kill myself. Oh, well, if I give you anything at this point, you're not going to feel it anyway. And this is what I'm offering you. My offer, it remains unchanged. And I offer what I have to you freely. But if you blackmail me to give you more, A, I don't have more. And B, if I did and gave it to you, you wouldn't feel it. So this isn't going to work, is it? And you have to remember that for yourself. So I think we're at the end, of tonight's questions. Thanks for showing up, for being here on a few days before New Year's. Enjoy New Year's Day. Look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. And between now and then, remember as always that it's always about real love. See you next Tuesday.